I had this interesting experience on the internet on Friday morning. There was two teams, two fan bases, I should say, going after each other, the typical insults. And one fan base is like, you know what, you worry about your running back who's due 47 million and all this other stuff. And you're like, oh, somebody was talking about Justin Fields. No, no, no. They were actually talking about Josh Allen. And it kind of just puts into perspective that everything that we've been going on with Justin Fields and a little bit of it, honestly, like, how many games has he won total in his NFL career? 10, 5 last year. Whatever. I know that Tyson Bagent won a couple of those games. We don't want to take away from Tyson Bagent. But it's interesting that somebody like Josh Allen, who I feel has established himself as one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, he still has to hear the rap that he's a running back who plays quarterback. It is just absolutely fascinating to me. And so I just I don't know. And it just kind of puts into perspective everything that we're going through right now. Fans are terrible. Especially fans of opposing team. We need to really block out the noise. And what I'm really hoping is that we're going to get some clarity on where the Bears are going to be moving. Again, we mentioned it with Bear Down Cuz this week. Like last year, it was March, like early March, when we found out that DJ Moore was going to be a member of the Chicago Bears. They sent away that first pick. I expect that answer to be actually earlier this year. And if you were expecting any answers from the press conference yesterday, I don't think that we got those. We're going to get to those in just a moment. But first, Sammy, let's go ahead and start the show.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast with Adam Ray.
Trying to cut it back. Justin Fields making magic happen. There goes Fields. Touchdown.
The sickest Chicago Bears and fantasy football podcast. Sports entertainment like no other. It's gonna be sick.
Hey everybody, welcome to the weekend edition of the Sick Podcast with Adam Rank. Thanks to all of you who are being here today. We've got some information to go over from the press conference yesterday, which was Thursday, depending on when you were listening to this. Want to kind of break down some of the information that came out of there. Not a ton of information came out, but still it was great to get an opportunity to meet the new offensive coordinator, Shane Waldron, the new defensive coordinator, Eric Washington. One person we did not get to meet, though, but was announced. Jennifer King is going to be the running backs coach for the Chicago Bears. A pretty significant hire. I know a lot of people will look at this, and I know how Bears fans, like, if Bears fans don't like Justin Fields or a quarterback who runs, I can understand. I know I can already see the takes formulating, but Jennifer King does come with a pretty lengthy NFL resume. She spent some time as an intern with the Carolina Panthers. She was on the Washington Commanders staff last season. She was a decorated college athlete, did play professional football on her own. So she does have some credentials. And again, I think that one of the things that you want from a coaching staff is a lot of different perspectives. And it actually leads to something that Matt Eberflus said off the top of his press conference yesterday, what he was looking for from his staff. So, Sam, if we can actually let's go to what Matt Eberflus said right off the top of that press conference on Thursday.
Look for in our coaches, I talked about some characteristics, with the staff a couple weeks ago, kind of onboarding those guys, and it's really about a few things that we talked about. And it's really about being creative. You want to be creative and you want to be curious, to really make the scheme go and make it go with the skill set that we have. And that's important on offense and defense. And that's one of the things we talked about. And that's why these two men are sitting right here with us today.
You know what? I got a lot of things that I want to unpack from this thing. First and foremost, let's go superficial. Let's start off being the drip. Oh, the drip on Coach Matt Eberflus. I honestly believe that he won over so many fans yesterday just by his look. Now, if anybody who knows me knows that I love professional wrestling, and you know that when a person is turning heel, like they grow out the heel goatee, they kind of change their look. They kind of, they change their persona. If you think about like The Rock, if you ever look at the early Rocky Maivia, like a goofball, like who is this person, kind of chunky, whatever. And then he becomes The Rock. Eberflus kind of became The Rock Yes, like a little Hollywood Hogan-esque. You know what I'm saying? Like he really now looks sort of like a badass. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like if you thought last year you're just kind of like, yeah, he seems like he seems like the opposition coach in a movie like Friday Night Lights or Varsity Blues or something like that. Now he's become the leading man. And I know it's superficial, but sometimes that kind of matters. And Jaquan Brisker was out there, yeah, talking about like he needs to keep the fade and all that stuff. I was blown away, and it really became one of the biggest. It's amazing, like as polarized as the Chicago Bear fans have been over the last number of weeks regarding Caleb Williams and Justin Fields. It felt like everybody came together talking about how much better Matt Eberflus looks now. And again, it's a superficial thing. It's like, like you screwed around on your create a coach on the NFL Madden or the NCAA football game, which will be returning again this summer. Like he really just now, like, yeah, like this is our guy and he's a leader. And it's funny because when you talk to the players, which we did over the Super Bowl week and what we've done over the course of the season, the players love him. And I liked him too. Like I did really like him when I got an opportunity to speak with him, and I hope to be able to do it again. I know that I've never said mean things about him. I've been like, hey, he's a cool guy. I don't know if he's the right coach, but he kind of proved himself over the course of last season. And one of the things that really helped him and helped his status, I'll be honest with you, if we had Jim Harbaugh, I would not be complaining about that at all. As a matter of fact, I wanted Jim Harbaugh to be the coach. I understand that. But now that we've, Matt Eberflus is our guy, and I understand giving him some more opportunity to go out and kind of cement his legacy here in Chicago. I really do believe that when he started taking over the play calling, the defense switched. It absolutely switched. It became one of the better defenses in the league, especially against stopping the run. And it wasn't a situation where like, well, teams aren't, when you stop the run, that's a huge thing, because typically when you see teams who don't stop the run, like perhaps like a team that's really good and really prolific offensively, which puts teams into one-dimensional spaces where they have to throw the football all the time to recapture a league. You see that a lot with like a high-scoring team. Like, hey, they're like, it's a mirage where you're like, hey, statistically they're good against the run, but they're not, because they're usually up by 15 points and the team's throwing all second half to try to catch up. The Bears were not in that situation. Nobody watched the Bears games last year. Like, we're so far ahead, everybody abandons the run. Nobody abandoned the run against the Chicago Bears, except for the fact that they couldn't do it. You just couldn't run against this team last season. And a lot of that was because of Matt Eberflus, and he took over the team. And there were some questions coming into this offseason. Is he going to continue as the play caller for the defense? Now, obviously, before Eric Washington was even hired, they had made that decision. Like, Matt Eberflus is going to continue to call the plays, and it's just going to be the way that it is. And I absolutely commend it. You see so many times with these offensive-minded coaches, and even the guys who are taking over this year, who, hey, young hotshot offensive-minded guy is going to be calling all the plays. We saw it with Matt Nagy. Well, we've seen it with a lot of other guys like Zach Taylor or anybody like that. Like anybody from the Sean McVay tree or the Kyle Shanahan tree, like Bobby Slowick. Okay, he wasn't. That's not the right example because he's the offensive coordinator, but you know exactly what I'm talking about. I think the defensive guys should call the plays, and I'll forgive my ignorance here. I believe that D'Amico Ryans calls the plays in Houston, but don't hold me to that 100%. I love that. You know what? These defensive coordinators should. And I love the fact that it's like, yeah, lean into your area of expertise. Brandon Staley kind of got into it as the head coach of the LA Chargers by, you know what? Like, I'm calling you're not the offensive guy. You know what I'm saying? Like, what are you doing? I really love that he's leaning in on the defense, and he should. It's what he's good at. He can still be the CEO of this thing. He showed it at the end of last year that he can be the CEO of the defense, of the entire team, I should say, but still concentrate on the defense. It's what he should. I mean, that's where he made his bread and butter in the NFL. The reason he is the coach of the Chicago Bears is what he's been able to do defensively, and you can't look at what happened at the end of last season and say to yourself, well, he should give up play calling duties. He should absolutely not. And as a matter of fact, they asked Eric Washington about this on Thursday during that press conference. Here's what he had to say about that.
Play caller. I'm pretty confident that I will do that again at some point. But right now, I'm really confident in what Matt is going to bring to the table in that respect, and I will support him as best that I can.
No, and I love that kind of attitude. And again, it lends itself to better camaraderie. I think there's some guys that, you get bogged down too much with the play calling situation, and it can be too much or whatever. I think that Eric Washington eventually, I think what he's alluding to is that perhaps, if he gets another opportunity with some other team somewhere down the road, because I truly believe that as long as Matt Eberflus is the coach of the Chicago Bears, and especially if the Bears continue to be great defensively this year, he's not going to give that up. And there's no reason to give it up. And I think that Eric Washington understands that. And really what he's brought in to do, where his area of expertise lies, is in the defensive line and getting that defensive line up and running. And that has been the hallmark of Matt Eberflus during the course of his coaching career, is making sure that defensive line is one of the best in the leagues. And when you look at roster building and what the Bears have really paid attention to over the last 2 seasons, it's rebuilding the offensive line. It's building up the defensive line, because we saw it last year when you make these teams one-dimensional and you turn it over to a team, you make that team have to throw the ball against a squad that's pretty good defensively, especially in the secondary. You create a lot of turnovers. That switch really made the Bears one of the most prolific teams in terms of turnovers. Remember the first 5 weeks of the season, we couldn't turn the ball over at all. Like it was a, teams were, even if we held them, we were not creating turnovers. The reason the Bears found so much success at the end of last season, especially defensively, is because they were creating turnovers. And that's what they want to keep building on. And I think that it's a great idea to continue that momentum. There was no reason to remove the defensive coach, who in essence is Matt Eberflus. Like that's what he's good at. Continue to do that. Eric Washington comes in there to continue back with the rock quote, like know your role and shut your mouth. You're going to be the D'Lo Brown. No, not shut your mouth, but he's like the D'Lo Brown, who of course is a huge Bears fan as well. He's going to be the D'Lo Brown. Like that's the guy. Like you're a complimentary piece. And that's what we're building right now. And that's one of the things that makes me the most excited and really kind of, and again, a lot of this will depend on what we do free agent wise, but you understand that there are more resources that are going to be going in to the defensive line. And a big reason why is because Eric Washington is here. And that part of it's good. So when it comes to, it's so interesting with the two sides of the Bears is that the defense is we're pretty much locked. The only question we have is like, are we going to be able to extend Jalen Johnson for a long period of time? He's going to continue to play for the Chicago Bears. He is going to be franchise tag. He's not going anywhere. As a matter of fact, I wrote an article for NFL.com, which you can check out right now if you go to NFL.com/rank. 5 players who should be traded this offseason. I started off with Justin Jefferson, by the way. Trade him. And selfishly, as a Bears fan, I said, but listen, the Vikings have done this before. They traded away Stephon Diggs and managed to survive. And they've got Jordan Addison on the team right now. The draft haul that they could get this, I don't want to talk about the Vikings, but the thing of it, but the one thing, the point was, my editor was like, do you want to include Jalen Johnson in this? I'm like, don't put that in me. I didn't even put Justin Fields in it. I mentioned Justin Fields off the top, where we're like, yeah, a lot of people are talking about Justin Fields being traded. I'm not getting into that. And as a matter of fact, I wanted to put Russell Wilson in that conversation, but the editors talked me out of that because they're like, well, nobody's going to trade for Russell Wilson. Nobody's going to do anything like that because, the contract and he's got a no trade clause and all that stuff. But one of the things when Russell, and this is a dumb rumor going around the internet right now, is one of the things that people are talking about, somebody on the internet, some kook on the internet is like, hey, the Bears could be interested in Russell Wilson if they draft Caleb Williams because Shane Waldron was, and I go, you know what? This is the most insane thing that I've ever heard in my life, because did we not learn anything with Andy Dalton that drafting a quarterback? And listen, I would love to be like, look at what the Packers. Yeah, of course, the Packers were a competitive playoff football team. Yeah, the Patriots and the Packers and some of those teams have been able to draft quarterbacks and leave them on the bench to develop, and it's worked out pretty well. Hey, how did it work for Jimmy Garoppolo sitting on the bench? Okay, and now you guys are throwing in 5 games of Jordan Love as see, this is what happens. Like I'm still not convinced that Jordan Love's that good, and that's a conversation for another day. But you're not bringing in Russell Wilson. Like, let's just squash that right now. But we are obviously bringing in Shane Waldron. Shane Waldron, if you were going into this press conference hoping that he was going to, as you know, tip his hand, so to speak. It wasn't happening. Let's take a look to what Shane Waldron was saying.
Shane, how do you go about planning an offense, though, at this point when you don't know? Or maybe you do, but like, at least right now, quarterback could be a couple of different.
There you go. No, I think, as far as planning the offense, the first part for us was building a staff, getting everyone together. And then, you have staffs. We've worked together with different people in the past. People have had different experiences. But the first part of that is really speaking our language. What's the 2024 Bears going to look like in terms of how we're calling certain coverages? How are we calling routes? What concepts do we want to, have as part of our core offense when we start OTAs and we start with that building block approach as teachers. So that's the first part of it. And to me, having a system that's speaking the same language, that's multiple in its ways that it can attack a defense, then you start to get the players and you start to know what your personnel is going to look like for that season. And then you build it around the player's skill set. And I think, for me, that's been a part of my core beliefs. And I feel like it's worked out well with the different quarterbacks that I've had a chance to be around over the past several years.
Or maybe you do know. I love that little, like, what a great question. Maybe you do know. And then the nervous laughter of like, yeah, maybe. I mean, I don't know. The great thing about the Chicago Bears this offseason, and even going back to last year with Bryce Young and the DJ Moore trade and everything like that, is like the Bears, like there's no leaks. There's nothing. Like, I know that Albert Breer came out and said something, and some of the other guys in and around the media have their ideas of what they think is going to happen, but nobody knows. Nobody has an insight. Like, whenever somebody comes out and says with a declarative statement of like, the Bears are automatically doing this, like, no. And I think that that's the one thing about the internet that kind of sucks, is like, people are just like, oh yeah, like they just, of course, this is exactly what's happening. Like, there's no doubt about it. Nobody knows. No, if you're Ryan Poles, you might know. If you're Matt Eberflus, you might know. Shane Waldron, with his nervous laugh, might also know. The Bears have not been tipping their hands, and it feels like the Bears sat down with Shane Waldron, and they're like, this is how you answer this question, because it's coming. They were well prepared, and it goes back to something, too, that we talked about with Carmen last year, is a lot of times Matt Eberflus seemed a little ill-prepared for some of the questions that were going to be arriving at his doorstep. And he sounded dumber than he, because he's not a dumb person. You know what I'm saying? Like, he's not an idiot, So some of those times, like, it really did sort of, it seemed like, I don't know what I'm trying to say, but like, he seemed ill-prepared at times. We're like, I can't believe I'm being asked this question. Like, the Bears went out of their way, it feels like, in this instance, of making sure that Shane Waldron was prepped and ready to go. And there was no slip up. There was nothing. And I'm sort of joking about the nervous laughter because it's just funny. And I think he knew. I think it's more of a sense like, this question's coming. And she phrased it really in a great way, like great comedic timing, whether she meant it or not. I'll give her credit. She meant it. He just was ready for it, but he was ready for the question. And so nothing was to be gleaned from that. And that's fine. And it's really just basically what you would expect, based on the personnel being, a little bit, being adaptive and everything like that. And Shane Waldron has shown during the course of his career that he can work with a number of different quarterbacks. And I think the success of Geno Smith just exemplifies that. Look, there was a journeyman quarterback who was like, he's a skilled player. It's not like Geno Smith is garbage, but he's a journeyman quarterback who is now a quarterback that the Seahawks are going to ride with. So whomever the Bears starting quarterback is going to be, we should feel pretty confident. And that's the one thing that I wish the Bears fans would start to just kind of hunker in on right now. It's like, we're going to be fine. Like this should be one of the best off seasons in Bears history. Like, we should be having a lot of fun with this. We control the draft. It's kind of like when I'm coaching and I'm coaching the goalies a lot. And I'm like, when you have the ball, like, you control the game. Like, there's no reason to panic. There's no reason to freak out because nothing, as long as you're holding that soccer ball, nothing can happen. And similarly, as long as the Bears are still holding the number 1 pick in the draft and Justin Fields, nothing can happen. There's nothing, teams cannot plan for anything until that gets settled. And in some respects, you're like, well, maybe the Bears should hang on. If the Bears know what they're doing, you don't have to tip your hand. Why let these other teams prepare? The Bears internally can prepare, and they probably, and again, they probably already know what they're doing. And they're like, I'm still like, there's no reason to give teams a head start or let them jump the gun, especially going into the combine. Like, you kind of want to hold that information during the combine because you don't want the team, like, why? Let Washington have to figure out which quarterback they're taking. Let New England not know which quarterback's going to possibly fall to them. Arizona could probably sit there at number 4 and be like, okay, we're taking Marvin Harrison Jr. as long as, no team as long as the Bears don't jump up to 3 or something insane. But like, but you cannot count on that. Like, you cannot count on Marvin Harrison Jr. being the 4th overall pick if you're the Cardinals, because you don't know what the Bears are going to do. And so there is some, like, as much as we would love to move on from this, and Justin is over this as well, he's got to know. But in any event, like, why let the other teams know? Why give away our hands? So let's start being civil, because the decision's probably already been made. I do, you know what, Sam, if I could do this again, if it's possible, can we go back? I want to listen to Matt Eberflus one more time, because there was something I wanted to get into, but I kind of glossed over. I jumped ahead to talking about the defensive coordinator spot. Can we go back? Can we do Matt Eberflus one more time? Can we listen to that clip?
Look for in our coaches. I talked about some characteristics, with the staff a couple weeks ago, kind of onboarding those guys, and it's really about a few things that we talked about. And it's really about being creative. You want to be creative and you want to be curious, to really make the scheme go and make it go with the skill set that we have. And that's important on offense and defense. And that's one of the things we talked about. And that's why these two men are sitting right here with us today.
Now, as many of you know, I love the series Ted Lasso. I'm currently in season 2. I never finished it. I watched the first 2 seasons, got halfway through the 3rd. The NFL year started. So now I reverted back to season 1. I'm back at season 1. I'm now on the 2nd episode, 3rd episode of season 2. But if you're familiar with that show, you remember in the first season where Ted Lasso is playing darts against the former owner of Richmond. And he's talking about the thing about like, hey, like, like, I always like, be curious. And it's a Walt Whitman quote. And he talks about being curious. If you were curious, you would ask yourself, does this guy know how to play darts? Everybody knows the scene. If you've watched the show, you're probably going to go back and watch it after this. Go watch that clip. Go find it on TikTok or YouTube or whatever. And it's a really great thing. And again, it goes back to, like, sometimes I feel like this change was very Ted Lasso-esque from Matt Eberflus, but the whole thing about being creative and being curious. One of the things that we were upset with last year with the offensive play calling of Luke Getsy was that way too many screens, way too reliant on the screens, being a little bit more creative, being curious. I love that word. I love that phrase. And again, I don't know if Matt Eberflus is a Ted Lasso fan as I am, but being curious, I think, was such a great phrase to put in there. And the kind of people that he's bringing into this organization and on this staff is to be a little bit more creative and do some things a little bit differently and not just be so predictable and trying to find out why things are working, why things are not working. Can we do this? Can we try that? I love that. I really love that. As much as, like, we got caught up in the drip and Matt Eberflus calling plays, being creative, curious, and adaptive, like adapting to the situation around you. I think a lot of Bears fans could agree with this. Is last season, we would go into games and you'd be like, hey, look, we're moving the ball. We're looking pretty good. And then it would kind of stall out. And then at the end, we needed the defense to either hold on for us or we needed Justin to go out there and win the game. And there was one game where he did drive. We all remember the game where he finally had that plays against Washington where he had to hit DJ Moore for the touchdown. There was another one where he against Minnesota drove down for the winning field goal. I think that being adaptive is probably going to be one of the most underrated aspects of this team moving forward is being able to make adjustments during the game. And I know that sometimes when you talk to former players or former coaches and they, like, hey, halftime adjustments are overblown in the fact that like you don't go in there and pull out a whiteboard. But at the same time, I think it's adapting to the flow of the game. If you looked at the Super Bowl this year, the Chiefs were very adaptive, which is easy when you have Patrick Mahomes, but able to be like, okay, what's working, what's not working? Again, being curious, like what is working? What can we do? Who can we exploit? Where's the weakness? What are we finding? Being able in the flow of the game to being able to make those decisions is something that the Bears have lacked over the last couple of seasons. And now you kind of understand that Matt Eberflus recognizes that was a problem and he addressed it with the hires that he made. So for me, coming out of that thing, again, it would be nice to know what they were doing, but it's not necessary for us. We don't need to know. Okay. It would be nice to know. We could stop arguing on the internet. And again, we will not stop. Like that's another thing too. Like we're not stopping this argument. If they traded Justin Fields tomorrow, the argument is still going on because the people who are pro Justin Fields will be like, we should have done this. And, like, I can't believe that. And if we trade the number one pick, the mostly pro Caleb people are like, I can't believe that we're giving like, no, the Bears fans are just not going to sit there and necessarily accept whatever. I love that people are like, what? Once we know, it'll be even worse. It's going to be even worse. And the people that are dug in, like, we're going to have to be very creative and curious in the way that we get the two sides back together. Living in this country, that it's very polarizing right now, not just as being a Bears fan, but just your walk of life, trying to get back to where like, hey, we can be civil with each other. At some point, I would love to be like back in the old days, when one side lost, you went over and shook the hand of the person that beat you and said, okay, let's work together and make this all better. But I really do believe that the Bears have done a great job with their coaching hires. And again, we don't know, like, how can you make that decision? So we can't. But we brought in a play caller who has had success calling plays in the NFL. We have brought in a defensive coordinator who's had success in the NFL, and he's just going to be there as a complementary piece for a defensive coordinator or a defensive-minded head coach who has proven that he can call plays in the NFL. So at least, if nothing else, the defensive side of this team is going to be rock solid. And we're going to be, there's no chance of regression on that side, I hope, barring anything. But I really do feel comfortable. So anyways, I hope this helped. I hope you all enjoyed this. Thank you so much for joining us here today. We will be back next week for Take It to the Rank. We've got a lot of great guests lined up over the next couple of weeks. And of course, if news breaks, if there's a trade that happens or anything like that, that we will be back. Of course, follow us. Make sure you've liked and subscribed this podcast and all the various different things. Make sure you're following us, like us on YouTube and all that stuff. And of course, on social media. So if anything happens, we'll be back. But until that time, we'll see you on Wednesday night. And bear down. Sammy, go ahead and play us out.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast with Adam Rank on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.